Hi, it's Amalia again with a history video. There's Alana. She's making sweet potato curry. And I drank this. This video is brought to you by Milwaukee's Best Ice and fountain soda. Ta-da! So the story I'm going to tell you today is about a guy named Oskar Kokoschka, who is a famous German painter. But the story starts before that. Unfortunately, I am not totally tech savvy, so I can't have this music playing over the video. But if you look up the composer Gustav Mahler, that's Gustave space Mahler, and listen to his music, he is the beginning of this story. And he was a late 19th, early 20th century composer. And he married a young woman named Alma. And she took his last name. And then he died and left her as a widow. And then she went off to sleep with a bunch of crazy artists and musicians and a priest. So she used to call herself the wife of the four arts because she was a huge art slut. She just went around sleeping with all these different famous artists. One of them was Oskar Kokoschka. So she broke up with him and went out with Walter Gropius after that, who founded the Bauhaus and I think is responsible for the standardization of screws. And Oskar Kokoschka was so upset that she broke up with him that he joined the Austro-Hungarian cavalry. And in World War I, he was shot in the temple with a bullet, and he lived, but he never painted the same again. His paintings got super weird, and you should definitely look them up. His name is spelled Oskar space Kokoschka, I believe. Something like that. And this story was told to me by I used to work at the St. Louis Art Museum, and I happened to run into the head of the theater department at Washington University of St. Louis, and he told me the story. So this is coming from, and he knew Oskar Kokoschka personally, so this is coming from someone who knew him personally. So basically, he was shot in the temple, and then he got really weird after that. And World War I ended, and he was living in Germany. He was Jewish, and he was friends with all of the famous artists of the time, most of whom were Jewish or, a deviant homosexual in some way. Friends with Fritz Lang, the guy who directed Metropolis and M, and friends with a bunch of famous people. And apparently, he threw the best parties in Berlin. And another weird thing he did was, because he was so obsessed with Alma Mahler, Gustav Mahler's widow, he went to a Parisian doll maker and had a life-size sex doll made of her. And then had it, he hired a maid to, have the sex doll carried around and taken care of so he could take it with him to, the opera and the symphony. Weird, right? That's fucking weird. So, anyway, he threw the best parties, and during the time in between World War I and World War II, in Germany, there was a rising Nazi movement, and some Nazi youth broke into one of his parties because they knew he was Jewish and a sexual deviant, and a deviant painter, because he painted modern paintings, and they didn't like that. And they broke into the party, a bunch of Nazi youth, and, Fritz Lang was there, and, a bunch of famous people were there, and, they took the sex doll, and in the light of the balcony window, cut off her head, and threw the sex doll into the garden off of the balcony. And then Fritz Lang and Oskar Kokoschka and all their friends were like, shit, what the fuck? We gotta get these Nazis out of here. So they, had a rumble, and they, kicked all the Nazis out. And then Oskar Kokoschka was really upset because his sex doll got fucked up. So he's like, everybody has to leave. And then the next day, the police came because neighbors had seen what they thought was a woman murdered in the balcony window. And then they thought they saw a woman's body without a head thrown over the balcony. So the police came the next day and they're like, we heard a woman was murdered here last night. And Oskar Kokoschka, insane, is like, they killed my wife. The Nazis killed my wife. I buried her in the garden. And then so the police go and dig up the body and it's like a weird sex doll. So you can imagine how confused they were. They were pretty confused. Anyway, yeah, he had to escape to Switzerland during the Holocaust because he was Jewish. And then he lived until like 1985 and remarried another younger woman. And she like took care of him and like, you know, kept him from going insane and doing anything insane. And he still had brain damage from World War I. And this guy who had told me this story, who is, I actually can't remember his name right now, but I'm sure if you looked up Washington University head of theater department, his name would come right up. Anyway, I met him in the gallery randomly, and he was telling me the story. He wrote his PhD dissertation on Oskar Kokoschka's plays. And Oskar Kokoschka was still alive when he was doing this, so he contacted him. And Oskar Kokoschka, crazy, is like, come visit me in Switzerland. Might have been Sweden, but I think it was Switzerland. And so this guy, this theater student, goes and visits Oskar Kokoschka and his young wife in Switzerland. And Oskar Kokoschka's super weird. And he's like, here, have some of my original etchings. But because of the, like, the laws about transporting artwork, there was, like, a huge tax on that or something. So this guy was a poor grad student. So he just, like, duct taped a cardboard thing underneath the train with the etchings in it. And maybe I shouldn't have said this because it's totally illegal what he did, but he smuggled those etchings out of Switzerland and still has them today. And I'm like, well, that's pretty crazy. Alma Mahler married a bunch of people after that. She married Walter Gropius, who I earlier said I think he standardized screws. Like, I think that was one of his contributions. He started the Bauhaus, founded modern art education as it is done today. And then she divorced him, caused some priest to leave the church and marry her, and she left him, and then she married some other famous, like, guy who I can't even think of the name of right now. Anyway, she was a total art slut. I am so jealous of her. Like, how many awesome artists and, like, composers and priests did she sleep with? Like, I always talk about how I'm like, oh, I would sleep with Mao Zedong. I would not sleep with Stalin. I would sleep with Lenin. I'm like, Alma Mahler actually did all that shit. You know, like, she's one of my idols, right? Alana, right? She's like the super art slut.
Did she sleep with any dictators, though?
She didn't sleep with any dictators, as far as I know. Well, then I guess she's not as cool as me, because that's what I always talk about. Yeah, okay, anyway. Art slut. Nah, Oskar Kokoschka's crazy sex doll. Ha ha ha. End of transmission.